So this morning, we're going to start out in the book of Matthew. We're going to jump into Luke some too, but we're going to start out in Matthew chapter 22. Now going back last week, Jesus gave us 3 parables on what it was like for those that accept Him and those who don't. And we realized very quickly that if we don't accept Jesus, we're going to spend an eternity in some place that's not good. And of those that do accept Jesus, we're going to spend eternity with Him in heaven. Now this week, we're going to read about 4 questions that Jesus has asked, or He's asked 3 questions. 3 are asked by His opponents, and then the 4th question, Jesus answers Himself. Well, we're going to only have time to look at the first 2 questions. So if you want the other 2 questions and you want the answers to those, you're going to have to come back next week. All right?
All right.
Or listen on the radio if you're traveling. So yeah. But the first 2, or the first question was asked by the Herodians, and this was about paying tribute to Caesar. So the first 3 questions are asked by Jesus' opponents, like I said, representing the 3 major political parties of the day. There was the Herodians, there were the Sadducees, and there were the Pharisees. Those were the 3 political parties. Now, political/religious parties. So in turn, they each try to trap Jesus with a particularly difficult question. They're going after Him. Not only does Jesus answer their questions so well that they don't dare ask Him another, but He also perceives and exposes their true, hypocritical, and their hostile motives in the whole process of this. He understands what they're going after. And finally, Jesus asks His own difficult question, which no one is able to answer. Like I said, we're going to get to that next week. But this will end the discourse between Jesus and His enemies. After this, there'll be no more of this conversation between them, and there's nothing left to talk about. Now, their only recourse is to continue on with their assassination of Jesus. So let's get into the Scriptures. Matthew 22, verses 15 through 17. It says, "Then the Pharisees went and plotted how to entangle Him in His words, and they sent their disciples to Him along with the Herodians, saying, 'Teacher, we know that you are true, and you teach the way of God truthfully, and you do not care about anyone's opinion, for you are not swayed by appearances. Tell us then, what you think? Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not?'" Okay, so this first group to try their hand at outwitting Jesus is a tag team of Pharisees and Herodians. Okay? Or Herodians, I'm sorry. Now, under normal circumstances, these 2 groups are enemies. They don't like each other. But now they're teaming up to go after Jesus. Now, the Pharisees represent the religious right wing. And the Herodians, on the other hand, believe that the road to peace and prosperity in Palestine is alignment with Rome. Okay? So no one did that better than the Herod family, and they are supporters of the Herods in their various governmental positions. So these Herodians, they supported Herod, and Herod said that all of our wealth and all of our prosperity will come from our alliance with Rome. So through their false flattery, they act like they sincerely want an answer from Jesus. They come and they say all these things. First thing, they say to Jesus, "You are a man of integrity, therefore we can follow your example in this." Okay, they're trying to build Him up. They're trying to fluff His feathers. Secondly, "You accurately teach the will of God, therefore we can trust your opinion in this." All right, which is true. And thirdly, "You are not swayed by men, therefore we can believe your answer will be unbiased." So they come pouring all these accolades on Jesus, and they're a bunch of phonies. What their statements they've made are true. They just don't believe them. Okay? But they're trying to get Him to answer their question. But no one is fooled by this false flattery. Okay? And it is clear that their simple question, should we pay taxes to Caesar or not, it's intended and is designed to trap Jesus. If he says no, okay, the crowds will be delighted, of course. I mean, who wouldn't say, all right, no more taxes? Who wouldn't go for that? I mean, we'd all be about that, right? They hate taxation. Who likes being taxed? Now, one week I raised my hand, and John raised his hand real quick because I did. He said, "I'm going to pay more attention. I'm going to listen to what he said." He didn't raise his hand. And unlike, very much like today, more than 1/3 of their income goes to paying taxes to the Romans. So, I mean, stuff keeps going on and on and on. Time doesn't change much. In addition, the coin itself has a very offensive inscription on it. All right? It says in their language, Tiberius Caesar, son of the divine Augustus, is on one side. And then on the flip side, it says Pontifex Maximus, which means the most high priest. This is on their coin. And while the crowds would have loved Jesus to ban taxation, the Herodians would have immediately arranged for his arrest and his execution if he did. On the other hand, if Jesus says yes, we should all pay taxes to Caesar, the people, urged upon by the Pharisees, would stop following Jesus. Okay? And after all, any Messiah who can't throw off the shackles of this Roman domination, and especially this taxation, is not worthy of support. Okay? So, it appears that Jesus is trapped here. They've got him. Right? Wrong answer. Let's see what happens. Matthew 22, 18 through 22. It says, but Jesus, aware of their malice, said, why put me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin for the tax. And they brought him a denarius, and Jesus said to them, whose likeness and inscription is this? And they said, Caesar's. Then he said to them, therefore render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And when they heard this, they marveled, and they left him and went away. All right, and then Luke, chapter 20, verse 26, it says, and they were not able in the presence of the people to catch him in what he said, but marveling at his answer, they became silent. All right, so Jesus knows what they're up to, and he calls them on the carpet. Okay, why do you test me? It must have hurt being identified publicly as a hypocrite. Now, if you're a Christian, probably most likely you've been called a hypocrite at some point. And we can find that offensive if we want, but it can hurt, it can sting. But the big sting for these people is yet to come. All right? Jesus calls for a coin. And this is marvelous. The very fact that they have a Roman denarius in their possession indicates that they accept Roman rule at some level. If you're going to defy the government, why are you carrying their money? Sorry, but you're going to accept their rule to some level. After all, you can't accept the government's right of coinage without also admitting a right of taxation. So moreover, the coin itself was blasphemous, for it held an image of the emperor with the words divine Caesar and high priest. So, as Matt France says, the two titles together could hardly be more calculated to offend Jewish piety. So there's a reason why the Romans are doing this. They know they have to carry the coin, but they're slapping the Jews in the face every time that they pull a coin out of their pocket that has Caesar's name on it, and it says high priest on it. So here we got these Jews that are carrying Roman coinage, and they're basically just showing their own hypocrisy. So Jesus simply holds up the coin and asks whose picture is on it. They must have seen where he was headed even before this thing slips, their answer slips off their tongues. The logic is so simple and yet so profound here. All right? Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and give to God what belongs to God. Pretty simple. The word give is literally to give back. Because it wasn't theirs. They didn't make it. They didn't mine the gold. The coin was given to them as a loan. They're giving it back. Thus, Jesus implies that our taxes are obligatory. That is, we owe them to the government as surely as we have financial obligations to God as part of our stewardship. All right? We should give back to God because God has given us everything. Amen?
Amen.
I mean, what have you gotten on your own? Well, I've gotten everything on my own. I've worked for everything I've ever got. Well, if it wasn't for God allowing you to have these things, you wouldn't have nothing. That's good English right there.
Yeah.
Okay? You wouldn't have anything if it wasn't for God. So we owe God, right? Nobody's going to deny that. So we owe the government when they loan us their money. You can live without government money. You can go out and you can mine gold. You can go out and with the possession that God has given you, you can fair trade. Okay? If John's got vegetables and I've got a lawnmower, I can get food from John if I go mow his yard. We can trade. We don't need money. Right? But it makes things a lot easier. So we subject ourselves to that. So therefore, we should pay a certain amount of taxes on that money that the government gives us. As much as we hate it, that's the way it is. And that's what Jesus is saying here. Give to Caesar what's Caesar, give to God what is God's. Now the Pharisees, with their tenuous partners, the Herodians, they attempt to trap Jesus with this political ambush here. And Jesus' answer is evasive, it's brilliant, and it's condemning at the same time. He condemns the emperor by exposing his blasphemous coin, and he condemns his enemies by exposing their deciduous motives, and he condemns the crowds for not fully giving themselves over to God by following him. So he slaps everybody right here with this one question brought on by the Herodians. The Pharisees and the Herodians are stymied. Okay? They have laboriously contrived this impenetrable question. We've got him now! And the scheme was foolproof. Yet, in this less than 15 seconds, this uneducated Galilean dismantles their question, exposes their motives, and convicts their hypocrisy. And all they can do is walk away with their tails between their legs. They've been beat. Strike one. The Herodians are out. Now the Pharisees, however, will be back for a second beating later. All right, question number 2 that's asked of Jesus by the Sadducees. And it's about marriage in the resurrection. Mark chapter 12, verses 18 through 23. Mark chapter 12. So it says, "Then the Sadducees came to him, who say that there is no resurrection. And they asked him a question, saying, 'Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies and leaves a wife, but leaves no child, the man must take the widow and raise up offspring for his brother. There are 7 brothers. The first took a wife, and when he died and left no offspring, the second took her and died, leaving no offspring, and the third likewise, and the 7th left no offspring. Last of all, the woman also died. And in the resurrection, when they rise again, whose wife will she be? And for the seven had had her as a wife.'" So, here comes round 2 from the Sadducees, right? This group died out with the destruction of the temple in AD 70. So the Sadducees didn't last long after the temple was destroyed in AD 70. So the little bit that we know about these Sadducees comes from the Bible, which if you want to do some study, the Sadducees are only mentioned 14 times in the Gospels. We know from Josephus, the writer of Jesus' day, and early Christian writers about, this is all we know about the Sadducees. Since all these sources were enemies of the Sadducees, we should handle our information with care, because everybody that wrote about them was an enemy of them. So nevertheless, the Sadducees were apparently the religious liberals, denying any kind of resurrection, either in the form of angels or spirits. If you go to Acts chapter 23:8, it specifically says that they did not believe in the resurrection, they did not believe in angels, and they did not believe in spirits. This is the Sadducees. They ran the temple. That's why when the temple was destroyed, they lost their jobs. They just no longer existed. So they also apparently prioritized the Pentateuch over the rest of the Old Testament. The Pentateuch, Penta is what, 7? That's the first 7 books of the Bible, and certainly denied the validity of the oral traditions of the Pharisees. So they held the first part of the Bible as sacred, not so much the rest of the Old Testament didn't mean a whole lot to them, and they totally ignored the oral traditions of the Pharisees. And it looks like they were the dominant force in the priesthood, hence they would also control the temple. All right, so this is who's asking Jesus this question. So they came to with this cool civility, the philosophic objectivity, and this false flattery as well. They come here trying to fluff his feathers as well. Their question concerns levirate marriage as it would apply to the resurrection. This is marriage within the Levite clan. All right, this isn't just everybody. I didn't understand this until I did this research on this, but they're talking about levirate marriage, the marriage in the clan of the Levites. All right? Now, all 3 synoptics clarify that the Sadducees do not believe in a resurrection. They don't believe it. So thus their goal is not to trap Jesus with a false dilemma or to elicit any kind of real answer from him. Rather, they try to force him to deny the concept of resurrection by showing how ridiculous it would be with a worst-case scenario of levirate marriage. And they're very loosely citing Deuteronomy 25:5 and Genesis 38:8. They're going back to the Pentateuch. This is where Deuteronomy and Genesis is found. And they're going to cite these very, very, very loosely. In doing so, they would not only defeat Jesus, but the Pharisees as well. Because the Pharisees believe in a resurrection. So the levirate marriage was not at all that common in Jesus' day, if it was even practiced at all. So they didn't even practice marrying within this organization. Okay, these Levites didn't really even marry, and so this whole thing, this whole scenario is just basically hypothetical. Okay, so in fact, the only two recorded examples of levirate marriage in the Old Testament are Tamar in Genesis 38 and in the book of Ruth. Chapters 1, 11 through 13, and 4, 1 through 22. These are the only two examples where we find out of this levirate marriage. Nonetheless, if all 7 brothers had this woman as their wife, trying to fulfill their obligations to provide an heir for their brother or their brothers, to whom would she belong if a literal bodily resurrection were true? This is their question. All right? Would that not necessitate a heavenly incest type situation? When they get to heaven, we've got all these brothers and this one woman. Are we not necessitating some kind of an incestual type of behavior? So they could have made the same point with just 2 brothers. They could have said just brother 1 and brother 2. But instead, 7 makes the point all the more vivid and all the more ludicrous. They've just blown this thing up. Let's look what some of the scriptures say. Mark chapter 12, verse 24 says, Jesus then said to them, is this not the reason you are wrong? Because you know neither the scriptures nor the power of God. And then in Luke chapter 20, verses 34 through 36, and it says, and Jesus said to them, the sons of this age marry and are given in marriage. But those who are considered worthy to attain to that age and to that resurrection from the dead, neither marry nor are given in marriage, for they cannot die anymore, because they are equal to angels and are sons of God, being sons of the resurrection. This was Jesus' response. So Jesus is going to give 2 answers to their question. He gives two answers. The first relates to the power of God, and the second relates to the scriptures, both of which the Sadducees are ignorant here. Okay? First, the Sadducees apparently believe the resurrection would necessitate a new body like this present one, including sexual attributes. They're assuming we're going to go back and we're just going to repeat what we're doing now. We're going to be the same thing we are here. We're going to be the same bodily resurrection. We're going to have the same desires, everything's going to be the same. But God can give us new bodies that are beyond the bounds of marriage. Amen? So, this still happens today. A lot of people still assimilate what we're going to be like in heaven the same way we are here on earth. And I don't think we're going to be anything close to what we're here. Praise the Lord.
Amen.
Because I'm fat, I'm smelly, and I'm stubborn, and I'm bullheaded, and all those other things. I hope He takes all that and gives me a whole different body and a whole different persona and a whole different attitude. My wife says amen as well. Believe me. So, marriage is an excellent idea in our present world. I love being married to my wife. I love what marriage brings. I love what it represents. It provides a resource for intimacy, procreation, and protection of the family unit. These are some of the things that marriage brings. But in the resurrection, none of these things will be necessary. Okay? We're not going to have these needs. Procreation will be a thing of the past for the new earth, for the new earth will be filled already with saints of all ages. Okay? So there's no need to procreate any longer. Nor will we have the need for intimacy provided through sex. Okay? In heaven, we'll have the capacity for intimacy with many people without jealousy and competition. We're going to have an intimacy that's beyond our knowledge that we assume has to be fulfilled by a sexual desire. We're not going to have that. There's not going to be any jealousy. There's not going to be any competition in heaven. And the family unit will no longer be necessary because, one, there will be no need for protection. We're going to be up there with God. There's no need for protection. There's nothing bad there. It's all good. And secondly, it will have already served its function in teaching us the structure of our relationship with God. Okay? So the family unit is teaching us what our relationship with God is going to be. The only value of sex then would be for physical pleasure. Alright? Now granted, that's not a small thing. Alright? Okay? But it is not reasonable to believe that God, the giver of good gifts, could replace sexual pleasure with an even greater sensation in our new bodies. Right? What we find pleasurable here on earth and what we get enjoyment from and what we get pleasure from is not going to be the same things that we get those things from in heaven. What are those things going to be? I don't know. If you want to know, do everything you can to get there and find out for yourself. Because if you're in heaven, I think pleasure is going to be abound, and we're not going to even have any idea what it's like. Like the song says, I can only imagine. But on the inverse of that, if you don't end up in heaven, you end up in hell, those pleasures are going to be gone. I don't think there's going to be anything pleasurable at all whatsoever if you're in hell. Just saying. I can't imagine why there would be anything there that's pleasurable. So, yeah, and so he's going to give us this. The bottom line is that sex will not be needed, nor will it be missed. So these guys have missed the boat. Now, when Jesus says that they will be like the angels, all right, he does not mean to imply that we will share each and every quality that they have. Angels were created beings of one sort. Humans are created beings of another sort. Doesn't mean that once we become heaven, we turn into an angel that he created otherwise. That's not what that means. That's not what Jesus is saying here. All right? In fact, the primary comparison is in the fact that we will no longer die and will perhaps that angels do not engage in sexual intercourse. So, we are not going to die again. There's not going to be a second death for us. We're going to live forever. Angels don't die. Plus, he's implying that there's no need for them to have sex. We won't have to either. All right? This mention of angels would also conflict with the Sadducees' beliefs, since they deny that not only the fact of the resurrection, they deny the resurrection, but the angelic nature of those resurrected bodies. They don't believe in that. Again, like I said, Acts 23:8. If you read that, it's very specific. They don't believe in any of this stuff. Let's look and see what Luke chapter 20, verse 37 through 38 says. It says, "But the dead are raised, even Moses showed in the passage about the bush, where he calls the Lord the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Now he is not a God of the dead, but of the living, for all live to him." Matthew 22:33 says, "And when the crowd heard it, they were astonished at his teaching." And then Luke finishes, verses 39 through 40, says, "Then some of the scribes answered, 'Teacher, you have spoken well,' for they no longer dared to ask him any question."